Want to get it over with.
What's that?
I was going to ask Zon if he wanted to get it over with.
You want to get it over with?
Okay.
I would listen.
Okay, good morning, folks. Welcome to some of our longstanding friends in the State House. It's nice to see so many familiar faces here that we haven't seen in our room in a while. So thank you all for being here. As somebody said, when you talk about budget, geez, a lot of people show up. So it's good. I'm glad. And so this morning, what we're doing, just so people zooming in will understand what's happening. We are at the phase of our budget process in Human Services that we're going to be hearing from our budget teams. We have different teams for different departments and parts of the department. So we are going to be hearing from these budget teams about the work that they've been doing over the last 2 weeks to understand the governor's budget request, to look at other priorities that might not be in the governor's budget request that they have heard from in terms of, interest groups or advocacy, and also then to sort of ferret out, what are those things that rise to the top. And so I'm not sure the people who are in the room now were in the room the other day when I said that while we will have a complete memo that includes all of the things that our committee deems to be important to Vermonters, we are going to have some prioritization this year in terms of what makes it to the top. And so those will be things that we will be considering, not necessarily today. Our timeline is to have our final recommendations by the 26th, 27th, like next Wednesday, Thursday. So just so people know where we're at in the process. And so we're going to start off with DCF, Child Development Division, because they raised their hand and said, we'll go first. And you want to go to
Just so we continue with
Yes, continue with DCF. We'll do Family Services after that. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Representative Bishop and I have been working on our priorities. As a reminder, the governor's proposal included $3.5 million in caseload savings in the child care financial assistance program, and a $19 million base adjustment related to the payroll tax, the child care contribution. So that's what the governor recommended. We feel that there's some priorities that were missed in the governor's proposal. And our first priority right now, which we don't have an exact number for, is if folks who were here before remember, when we passed the child care bill, we included, one of the versions had a mandatory reimbursement rate adjustment based on an index that was very specifically for workforce education. And that version did not get passed. The version that did get passed was that the commissioner may increase the reimbursement rate based on this index, not to exceed 1.5% or 1.5 times what the percentage is. So our recommendation is to include language in the budget this year for that automatic increase annually. That way we won't be in a place we are with some of the other programs we've heard that are severely underfunded in a few years. So given that we have made the policy decision to invest in childcare, we want to make sure that the programs have enough wage rate increase, reimbursement increases to continue to keep up with inflation and higher costs in time. So we have language for Katie, and we are working with JFO to get numbers of what that would cost. I don't know what the index increase this year is, and Nolan is working on getting that information for us. And what was in the budget was 1.5 times And,
No more than one.
no
and a
more
half.
than 1.5 times.
In the
what
bill.
percent in the bill in Act 76. So I'm still not sure what our recommendation is going to be. I think it depends what the percentage is
Mhm, yeah.
and what the dollar
Yeah.
amounts are. So that's to be determined.
So that's, I just want to be clear that that's what has risen to you as your
As our
top.
top priority. And the reason why I think that's for me, and I think Representative Bishop would agree, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why that's a high priority is, you know, increasing reimbursement rates puts money directly in the pockets of programs that they can use to increase wages, recruit better, offer benefits, you know, have substitutes. So it's like direct, it has direct impact and hopefully will increase with workforce retention and all those things that we hear are still not completely addressed since Act 76 passed. So it would have a really direct impact. And I really feel that it was a missed opportunity to have that automatic increase in the bill as it passed 2 years ago.
Okay, I mean, I have in the last couple of weeks have often referred to the childcare bill as having you know, have this box. You know, appropriations often talks about putting things in a box. What's the box for childcare? What's the box for emergency shelter? What's the box for long-term care? So the box for childcare, we really built three sides of the box in Act 76. And so I look at this as this and, you know, maybe thinking about the, you know, other issues that we have. So we know, for instance, and we'll hear more about this on Tuesday, there are federal rules that we are out of compliance with that state that no more than 7% of families' income should be going towards childcare expenses.
I'm going to talk about that next.
Next, all right, so I won't come back. I just wanted people to sort of have the broader context of, and that is an issue that was not present when we passed Act 76. So the environment and the landscape changes, and one of the things that I really would like us to be cognizant of as you all are making your recommendations is, are there things that we can do that are smaller now that prevent us from getting to the place where frankly we are with long-term care and home and community-based services, where there's, you know, no periodic review. And if there's a way for us to do that, to not, you know, we have enough fires to put out, frankly. So if there is a way for us to do that without needing to add to the budget, then that's what we should be doing. That's just my personal bias. So
before I go to the 7% rule,
Yeah.
kind of to your point about the box. So one of the other things that came up in our discussions is that, again, folks who've been here for a while will remember that the CDD has been engaged in updating their technology for several years. And we've appropriated money over the years to, the first phase has been completed, and we've been waiting for the second phase of this new computer system to start. And that was one of the things, you know, to Madam Chair's point, that we, there are things that need to get done, that we need to make sure that we are not putting out fires in the future or looking for money in the future. So we did inquire with the department as far as where things are at for that information technology system, and if they have money set aside for the second phase. And they did get back to us that they have about $3.6 million set aside and are in an RFP process to find out to determine the final cost of that. So we feel comfortable with that plan, that at this point that is sufficient money to get them going on the next phase and can address it in future years. So just kind of.
and how much did you say?
3.6. It's $3 million from general funds and about 670,000 from CCDF. That's ongoing. The 3 million is one time. So that's not going to show up on our priorities because we feel like they have sufficient funding to get started on the next phase of the process, and they're in development. So that's good news. So now to the 7% rule. So in 2024, as Madam Chair indicated, the Office of Child Care issued rules that cap a family's copay contribution at 7%. Currently, Vermont is around 12.5%, I believe, with the enactment of Act 76. And the department is engaged in finding out, doing some modeling to figure out what that means financially, because some families are paying no copay, some families are paying less than 7%, and some families are paying more. So they need to figure out what that means financially to bring everybody down to below 7% and how it will impact all the families, make sure it doesn't have a negative impact on families that are paying less than 7%. So they're doing some financial modeling around that. Our recommendation is that we put aside some money to come into compliance for that. I pulled the number out, like the department hasn't, they don't have information to give us as far as how much money this will take. And they plan to come into compliance in fiscal year 27 and need some IT work and some other policy and communication work. So we want to put some money aside to kind of make sure that's happening. And that would be our second recommendation. We don't know how much. So I'm throwing out 5 million, but that's a number. I don't know. The department wants to get back to me, to us, and let us know what they feel is an adequate amount of money to kind of set aside to get them ready for this change that they have to comply with. And right now we're under a waiver. So we want to make sure, you know, we get to compliance as quickly as possible. And they have shared that they're working on this. So it feels good that they have a plan and they're going to come into compliance by August of next year. But we want to make sure that we have money set aside to make sure that they have what they need to comply. Any other conversations around this one? No.
Any other questions about that? That means, and again, we're going to be hearing an update on AXA in our O&A section on Tuesday. We're going to be having an extensive conversation with the department about updates around Act 76. So we'll hear more about the department's plans in that regard then too.
So our third priority is funding Building Bright Future. Building Bright Futures, $322,000. That would be an increase to their base. They currently receive, and I don't know how much they receive right now. I don't have that off the top of my head. But they haven't had an increase in a while. And this would be to sustain timely and direct advisement and monitoring required of the whole system. And the allocation would support personnel overhead, regional councils, and program expenses. And as Morgan kind of shared with us when she testified, they have done a lot of this work unfunded in the past couple of years with the, you know, Act 76 passage. There's been a lot of additional work that they've had to do that we have not funded. So we feel like this is a good use of not a lot of money, but that would really help support identifying where the gaps are, supporting programs across the state and the field. That's our third recommendation. Any questions around that?
So we did have an appropriation to them for Act 76.
Within Act 76, that's
Monitoring.
very specific. So this is outside of, this is for their statewide state advisory council work.
Mhm.
So it's a little separate because there's specific monitoring funding within Act 76. And this is to support the state advisory council work.
And so when was the last time that they had an increase?
I asked Janet for that information. I have not received that yet.
Okay, and what does it buy?
It buys 2 staff members, helps pay overhead, helps support regional councils, and program expenses contracts.
Okay, so 2 staff members that currently work there, or 2 staff members that they need to hire, or?
I think it would be for hiring, because if I'm remembering correctly, the Act 76 is 4 staff members that will be going away. And
The PDG has, so it's to replace some staff time. You're right, there are some members, some staff members that they currently have that are tied to the PDG grant that they will be.
Acronym busting, just to.
Sorry, preschool development grant. So they're hoping to
Okay.
retain two of those staff members that they will be losing because of the loss of,
Yeah.
the wind down of.
Okay. Okay. Not okay, I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm understanding, yeah. I'm under-
Marinating.
Yeah, I'm marinating, yes, I'm ruminating. It's the, sort of age old, we had a grant that funded these positions, the grant's going away and we really would like to keep some of them.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, so
understood.
that's third on our list. Fourth on our list is Children's Integrated Services that provide early intervention work and a lot of support to families with kids that have special needs within CDD. A few years ago, the CDD commissioned a study to determine the true cost of care for these families. Currently, the reimbursement rate is $650 per family per month. That's the rate that every CIS,
Per member, it's a per member per month kind
Per
of
month,
thing,
yeah.
okay.
And the case study, which was, I don't remember exactly when, I know it wasn't last year, determined that the actual cost of care when they did this study was $738. So again, going back to that, let's bring the rates up so we're not falling so far behind, given that this study is already a little outdated. We are recommending that we go up to 675, so by $25. And that would be additional appropriation of 450,000 to the base.
Can you find out what year that
That study was,
was
sure.
done? Yeah,
What someone in the room might be able to text me that information.
okay.
Um,
And then, so I guess I have a question. So that's direct services. And why I don't think anybody has any qualms and doesn't undervalue BBF. I'm curious at your placement of BBF above direct services.
That's probably because monitoring is really important to me, and I know they get paid to do the monitoring in Act 76, but the State Advisory Council plays such a big role in understanding what the needs are and what the gaps are that would help us invest the Act 76 money in appropriate places. So for me, it's really the understanding where the investments need to go, which BBF plays a big role in with the needs assessment work that they do and understanding where the gaps are. So I'm trying to balance, or we're trying to balance, like the need for monitoring and accountability with the need for direct service.
And so, I will say, it just gives me pause that I understand your rationale. But it's also, grant funded positions that, I'm not, this is the fiscal conservative side of me, people. I'm not, I'm not big on replacing grant funded positions, necessarily. So, can you find out when, and maybe you know this, when the last time that absent Act 76, because that was for a
Yeah, and
specific,
that's information I asked the
Okay.
department.
when was the last
I
time
will
that they got
do
an
some more digging.
increase? And like, what level of increase it was? Because I mean, theoretically, they were funded to do that base work with the council and with their regional partners, and all of that stuff is part of what their base is. But if they haven't had an increase in their base for 10 years, then that's a stronger argument than saying they want to keep two positions that were funded with PDG.
Point taken.
Okay.
And I will we will bring back more information.
Okay.
So the last two things on our priority list are really directly impacting workforce. Because as we have heard, there are, even though rates have increased and families have more access, there's still a lot of empty classrooms that programs cannot hire for to open. So we are recommending increasing base funding for this student loan repayment program to help keep childcare employees and educators in the field. So kind of give them some relief on their student loans to make sure that we have a professionalized, highly qualified workforce educating our youngest kids. And then there is currently a program that CDD operates. It's a youth apprenticeship program that helps high school students get the experience and the qualifications they need to start working in a childcare as soon as they graduate. And it has mentorship and stipends for the sponsoring childcare program to help them educate and train the high school students. And it's a really successful program. It currently serves 25 kids. And they have a wait list right now, so we're recommending clearing that wait list. The dollar amount for that is a little questionable because we have two different numbers that from the department and from the advocates. So we're trying to figure out somewhere between 50 and 150. So, which is very,
So it's a wide
that's a
range. Big range, yeah.
range. But we are, like, I think that's really important to focus on making sure that we keep adding to the workforce and supporting the workforce.
How much did you say to the student loan repayment?
500,000.
Okay,
That would be.
and how much is in base?
Currently,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay, so we need to know how much is currently in base.
Okay.
And ditto with the apprenticeship program.
That's it. Doug, did I miss anything?
I'll cover it.
You have anything you want to add, Doug?
I think Ray covered it.
Okay. Okay, next we're going to move to family services.
Okay, I'm gonna give us a status report on where we are, but there's not a lot changed from last conversation. I did ask DCF again, when will we get the data we need? And they have said it is coming today. So
Okay.
we should be getting the detailed information that will enable us, but we have a pretty clear sense of the concern areas. Briefly, what we're not concerned, we don't disagree with not adding more money for the DCM computer.
We don't disagree. Does that mean you agree?
Right, we
Okay.
agree.
All right. The CWIS program,
Right,
yeah,
right.
okay.
Because there's a reasonable amount of money pending getting the RFP out.
So is that, are they requesting more?
No,
Okay,
and we're okay with not requesting more.
Yeah, okay.
With not adding to it. In addition, an issue that's been in the past in terms of the investments needed to coordinate with the Raise the Age.
Yeah.
They have no money for that. We agree with that because we're about to get a run by on a bill from judiciary. There is not an intent to take the next Raise the Age step in the coming year. So we're okay with not adding money there.
can I ask a question?
Mhm.
So, well, I'll leave it for when we do the drive-by.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
So a sort of discrete but really critically important area is the question of supervised visitation. There was a grant that came through the Center for Crime Victim Services to cover for the statewide coordination. Supervised visitation is what enables children to continue having contact with a parent when there's been a decision that the child could be at risk being alone with a parent. But so child safety is critical, but a child having contact with their parents also really important. So this enables that to happen. That grant was not a grant that came from state money, which is the important distinction from filling in a grant. This was just out of Center for Crime Victim Services general budget. They were not getting money for it. And they can't afford to continue giving the grant to the organization that does that coordination. And that would be a really critical loss. There are bigger problems with the money that there are 4 counties that don't even have a program because there's not enough money that's been put into it. We don't see that as something that can be addressed and fixed this year because it needs to be sorted out with more effort. But we do think that $30,000, $640 to maintain the coordination is critical. And thanks to some good guidance from our chair, looked into a possible source, and it appears that there is the ability to do that backfill with a transfer from money in a special account under judiciary, because it's not a huge amount and it would be one time. And the chair of the Judiciary Committee thinks that would make sense. So we would want language saying Judiciary and AHS have to come back next year with a plan for how they are going to sustain this critical service. And whose share is appropriate. DCF kicks in 8,000. The Center for Crime Victims was kicking in, 30,000. It's not clear that the court system versus DCF is the greater area. Some of this is from child custody, divorce, so forth, which is not DCF related, but a lot of it is DCF related. So we really think that needs to be dug into deeper. But for this year, we need to sustain that system. So that's one item. One of the big items that is a recommended increase is that ongoing cost of transportation contracts for kids. We do support that as a need. Can't stop transporting the kids, but it raised a concern for us about whether under pressure for not having enough contractors, there could be backsliding on using sheriffs. Again, we're waiting for the data. If the data shows any indication of that, we would want to have language saying you need to start doing annual reporting again.
Thank you for reminding me about language. And one of the things, if you have a language request, just reminding you again to, it seems like you could go ahead with the one for the supervised visitation.
We have asked, Katie knows about that already.
Yep, thank you. So a reminder to any of the other teams as well.
The next category has to do with, Mentor Vermont had asked for added support last year, which we did support in our budget recommendation. They couldn't come up with a meeting time. We're meeting with them at lunch today. So
Okay.
whether we have a recommendation on that, we will know by Tuesday. But that sort of probably combines with the general concern that's been raised in others about all of these, direct services that are done by contract, which have zero increase in the governor's budget. The increases are only for inflation, for direct state services. And, what we were discussing is, that seems to be probably across the committee in a lot of areas. And that this might be something where instead of individual groups having to come and ask and us not really knowing and us having to ask, well, how much would an increase be? That we really ought to be saying the administration needs to come in and give us that information each year. Give us the information. What would it cost per 1% to give an inflation increase to all of the direct service subcontracts? And
You suggesting language for that?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
that we want to suggest language for that, but that would be on behalf of all of our areas. So we haven't jumped ahead on that yet, rather than even divvying up among our areas who does or doesn't need
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a good recommendation.
Our biggest unknown as yet, and hopefully better known later today, is the whole question of the youth campus and restrictive placements for kids who have been identified as being in need of a more restrictive placement because of juvenile justice involvement. And it's like this big black hole in terms of money. What we used to spend on Woodside, what money is being carried over for planning. One of the big concerns is that this youth campus is never going to show up in a capital bill request, because the plan is a lease to build kind of thing. So it will be in the appropriations budget, and we don't know. They don't know, but they've got some vague idea of what that may cost. And we also know that there continue to be less restrictive placements in the state where they're not being used to capacity because they can't fill the beds because they can't get the staffing. So we would like to have an eye towards recommending that some of that carryover money be invested in maximizing these
Existing
other
beds.
existing beds. But again, we don't have a specific recommendation until we actually see, what and where the money is.
Well, we've seen data before, I haven't seen it this year, but about the license capacity and then the actual capacity.
Yes.
Because due to staffing issues, and again, it goes back to your recommendation of, looking across, really all of AHS and the, the community provider types and asking them to present that information. Because, we haven't seen, we haven't seen anything. I don't know if it's been built into their budget, but we haven't seen anything that actually increases rates other than the folks who are PNMI, private non-medical.
It's only the
institution people.
PNMI,
It's
right,
only the
because-
PNMI, because those are in rural.
Because we would see them, which you say we haven't seen them, maybe, well, they don't exist if we don't see them because they would have been.
They would be on the ups and
increased in the
downs.
budget.
Yeah,
So,
they should be.
so they haven't been, and yet to leave it to, us to think of, well, what about this group? Or for a small agency to, oh, we have to go and lobby the legislature to get an increase, just is not a good way to be doing it.
No, and I like wholeheartedly support the concept of we have licensed beds out there with capacity if they had sufficient staff to be able to increase their capacity at these community-based organizations. And, we should be maximizing that, honestly, before we're, building on more restricted placements.
Right, and
Yeah.
in particular, because for some of these kids, if they get that intervention at that level, they're not going to end up escalating in
Mhm.
behavior and ending up needing something more secure.
Yeah. All right, that's, yeah.
With ours?
Yeah.
The fingerprinting is the big problem with getting the staff because they have to be fingerprinted and they're way behind. So I just want to throw in like you said.
So I think that there was, there's some federal money that we leave on the table because we can't seem to solve this fingerprinting issue. Because they don't, you have to certify that folks have been fingerprinted, and we allow people to
Right.
work alongside pending the fingerprint results. And this is a widespread problem, and I think we really need to maybe talk to government operations.
Exactly, because this
About
is
it.
school, this is an education problem.
Childcare
it's-
problem.
It's everywhere.
Yeah,
It's delaying, and that, yeah, we didn't single that out, it was in BAA, but
I
thank
just
you for
wanted to
bringing
throw
it up
in
because
there
it is,
because
it's a universal problem.
I
that-
think that would help with filling the beds if we could get
yeah.
people fingerprinted.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Or it would
we
give
get
us
them-
some
we get
federal
them-
money.
Right, we have access to additional resources. And so, okay, that is a good thing. And I will make note to contact GovOps.
GovOps, right,
about,
that wouldn't be in our
So-
budget memo, but it'd be. in-
Judiciary is where the bill that ends up to deal with background checks and fingerprinting.
Oh, so it might be judiciary, not-
Judiciary.
or both.
Well, when I put a bill in to deal with it, that's where it goes.
Okay. Okay.
That's a good one.
They have taken some testimony on it, but that was a while ago.
Okay. Front to Martin as well.
And I think the backlog is at the Vermont Criminal Information Center.
Mhm.
That's where the
Mhm.
holdup is.
Yep.
Yeah,
Like, they don't have enough
Staff, resources, capacity to do it, yep.
yeah.
So it does.
But it really is cross-cutting in terms of what
Yeah,
it
it impacts
impacts.
every
Yeah.
part of government.
True.
Okay, is that it from you, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hopefully a lot more to clarify.
Well, we got, yeah, the sort of big item. Okay, great, let's finish up with DCF in OEO and Economic Services.
Okay, well, today is an exciting day for us because we have two important meetings relevant to this issue. So we will have a more robust report for you after this weekend, because we're gonna work on it this weekend too after these conversations. So we're meeting with DCF at 11, and then we're meeting with reach out specialists at 3, which are two of the larger areas of this budget that we had questions about. beyond that, one change we had with the governor's budget was that, line item for DSET admin and support services was level funded, which would affect 211. So we're asking for, that base funding as well as an additional, their request, which was, 332,000.
Which is actually, isn't that the same amount that they got this year in one-time funding?
Yes,
But needing to put it into the base.
yeah,
And is that, I'm trying to remember from last year, but I think that will maintain 24/7 coverage.
yes, yeah, exactly.
322,000, that was
332, yeah.
332, okay.
Yeah, and we heard testimony about how important those services were and how widely used they were. We also, I think our conversation with DCF will be helpful today when talking about, GA support services and why those funds are being cut. Even though we know they're maxed out at capacity, with the GA, not program, but GA.
The non-emergency
Yeah,
shelter.
exactly.
Of the GA, yeah.
And so we're proposing a couple different options as to what we could do, which is either do better outreach, because we know that the need is there, and figure out ways to do that in an effective way, or we could, since some of those funds were allocated to, like, for example, medical costs, like a stipend to help cover those issues, we could instead give them directly to open door clinics or equivalents in different committees. These are just ideas, but we want to make sure that these funds, because we know they are needed, but just not being connected with the folks, how can we best put them in a vehicle where they are connected to folks utilizing that program?
So it's not a matter of reduced need.
Exactly.
It's really more of like, oh, you got to figure out where to go on
Exactly.
your own, as opposed to the outreach.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so, yeah, we know that money would be put to very good use for very vulnerable populations, so figuring out how we can work with DCF to make that happen. We have jurisdiction over the food issues here, and so there's a couple different layers to that, and I think we're gonna get support from other committees as well in requesting this, but particularly of interest to our committee is, we agree with the governor's budget, which recognizes that there will be increased demand for 3 squares based on their projections. So we were cool with that. And there are other layers to this too. We heard from the food bank as well, but we think we're going to collaborate with Ag and maybe a few other.
Ag is actually going to carry the water on it.
Okay.
And so
Yeah,
if what will be helpful is if you can just link up with them.
absolutely.
Let us come back with what their recommendation is going to be, and I'm sure that we will be able to support that. But
Absolutely.
it is helpful for things to appear in different committees' budgets, in multiple committees.
Yeah.
But they're going to take the testimony and all of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
probably already are.
So we'll
Yeah.
just be like a supportive.
Yeah. Go Ag.
Yeah. And tangentially to that, we know that a restaurant meal program is on the table, so that's something of interest to us, because we know it impacts the folks that we often need these services here too. So overlap there that will also might not be the direct ask, but we will be supportive. Reach up, as I said earlier, was an area of difference that we had with the governor's recommend. We only got the consultants' low-end projections, and that's why I think the governor decided to reduce that amount by 697,000 plus in this year's budget. So we had a lot of questions there because we know poverty as a rate isn't decreasing, so we're wondering what's going on there. And how can that money be used in a way that uplifts families with, a sense of autonomy and being effective.
Do we know what the high end estimate is? So the contractor gives a range, a low and a high end, and do we know what the high end was?
So that's precisely what we were looking for.
Okay.
And I hope in our 3:00 meeting today, we'll be able to get some better information on that, and then we can decide how to best utilize that. Of course, a continued conversation in this discussion as a committee is talking about the rateable reduction.
Yeah.
And so that might be brought up today, and like, is there a way to think about that strategically? If it's true that this is not the vehicle to do it, or to use these 600,000 plus dollars,
So when we had the Secretary of Human Services here, we asked her about the rateable reduction,
Yeah.
and she said, well, that's something you should ask the commissioner about whether or not that was considered. We asked, and so we kind of got the PC answer, which was, we had to prioritize, and essentially no.
Yeah. I mean, if we don't do anything, we're gonna be stuck at that, decades old number for
Yeah.
years. So I do think eventually we do need to chip away at that, whether it's in the teeniest percentage possible, but we can't just let this go on for decades to come.
And maybe the approach would be to update the base information on which it's the year
Yeah.
on which it's
Exactly.
based. So that we might not be able to decrease the rateable
Yeah,
reduction, but
Totally.
we should be able to
Equation.
update the year to get more current. So maybe you could focus in on
I
that.
think that's a wonderful point. So that will definitely be brought up in our conversation today. And then, of course, another big area we've been talking about a lot is HOP. So we have lots of questions there, and we want to make sure that the way we divvy those funds is in a very integrated approach. We know how to follow the money, and we know that it's being connected directly to where the people are and who the people are and what the specific needs of the people are. And so lots of different discussions about which, the different tiers necessary to reach those populations. So the very local community-based level versus administrative oversight, reporting, all of that. So being very thoughtful about each layer there and making some decisions based on our conversations today.
And I think, one of the things for, people to understand is that whatever we end up with for language in H91, we are trying to create a more integrated system. So instead of having, HOP over here and shelter and GA, HOP and shelter over here and GA over here, and we wanted to create a more integrated system. So what I encourage you to do is to be thinking about, but we also know there's going to need to be a transition period, probably FY26 will be the transition period. So I encourage you to think about language to present to the committee about prioritization of HOP, and to look at the language that was in the budget this year and make any recommended changes to that, because we will need specific language in the budget about how the program should be operated this year. Okay? Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, just back to the reach out. Just want to remind folks that we did pass a bill
Mhm.
last biennium that asked the department to come back with a plan to reduce the rateable reduction. And I just looked up the report's here. But just saying, disappointing that even though we passed this law explicitly asking that they reduce the rateable reduction, that they're here proposing to cut benefits to families. So just putting that out there on record.
And did they propose, I don't have the
I'm looking
report
at,
open.
yeah,
I
I just pulled it up.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'd just be curious.
Yeah, so
It's been a
I can
while
share
since
this
I
report
read.
to folks.
Yeah. It's
Maybe
been a while
it'll be
since
good
I
for
read it.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate
us
that.
to review
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. One last little tidbit here, which was important to me, and I think a lot of other people in the community, was just finding space for just a little bit of language talking about prioritizing in-state contractors or employees versus pulling out of state for our operations, because especially for shelters and staffing, because we were concerned that was done very inefficiently last time, and we obviously know resources are tight. We need to be very thoughtful, and we know how it affects our economy as well. We have awesome qualified people here. I think if we offered them an appropriate rate, just as we did for the folks in North Carolina who were brought up here, they would come. So
Some might say that was a little bit excessive.
yes,
Was paid to the folks from North Carolina.
Yes, so
I would personally.
yeah, we're gonna definitely make sure that at least a small bit of language is dedicated to that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like you have important meetings today.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Esme, appreciate
Thank you.
it. Anybody have any questions around that? So sort of as takeaways, making sure that we have language around how the program, how the GA program, the temporary shelter program would run this year. And if you have thoughts about prioritization of HOP funds, I encourage you to make sure that you look at the current HOP program and the guidance that is given to people applying for that. So, because if we don't need to have language, we shouldn't put language in just because, so look and see whatever that they're currently doing first. Okay. All right, let's move on to Dale.
Sure. So, first thing that we're really looking at is the rate study from 23 and how we fully implement that. These are in sections B334, kind of broke it down into two sections. There's long-term care, ERCs, level 1, 2, and 3. Would need about 3.8 to kind of bring it up to the rate study. So that.
GF, or is that gross or
General.
net? That's
Mhm.
general fund?
Yeah.
No one's got a crease in his head. Oh, okay.
Want me to repeat it? 3.8 for ERCs 1, 2, and 3. So
Implementing the rate study.
implementing the rate study from 23.
Okay.
But I broke it down into two, and if you look at the choices for care, personal care, maker service, respite, companionship services aspect of it, that's another 2.2. So the total is just over 6. So that's probably more in line with the number but we can talk. I think
Okay.
you're right.
And so are you saying that that's your number one priority?
Yes,
Okay.
was just implementing that rate study.
So with those numbers, would that be fully implementing,
Correct.
reaching the rates that, of course, those rates are now 3 years old.
They're 3-year-old rates.
Okay,
Correct. So just bringing it up to where we are.
okay. And I'm sorry, that's total was approximately 6 million something, is that what you said?
So it'd be 6 million, correct. Okay.
Yeah, and that's gross, or that's GF.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
General fund.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, now we're moved to Dale, we're talking a lot of Medicaid money. So when we say GF, that just means general fund, which is state funds. So if I ask if it's gross or net, gross is, I'm referring to the total of state and federal funds, net is being just the GF share of what we would need. So just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah. So keeping it kind of in the same, even though this is lower down in our priority list, but just so we're staying in the same line item of the budget, to give those home and community-based providers a 4% increase, which we're still working on, would be 12.1. And that works out to 6.57 for each 1%. We haven't really settled on the 4%, but that's
Can
kind
you,
of,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
no
say I got the 4%
Yep.
part.
yep,
Say the
So
last part,
1%
yeah.
is 6.57.
GF,
Correct. No, that's
Gross.
total gross,
That's total.
2.77.
okay,
2.77 GF. Yeah.
okay. So 2.77 GF for each 1%
Correct.
for all home and community-based
Correct.
services and choices for care, brain injury,
Yep.
developmental services.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so
But that's lower down on the list because what we're trying to do is at least get them
I get, yeah, I
to the
hear you.
23,
I hear
to
you.
the 23 rate study. So that's higher up on our list.
So what number is this? Is it 2, 3, 4? What? In terms of priority?
Six.
It's 6. Okay, all right, number 6.
Mhm.
All right. That's not gonna go anywhere at number 6.
Happy to move it up.
No, I mean, I'm waiting here to see what 2, 3,
Yeah, like
4,
what's
and
between
5 are.
1 and 6?
We'll see,
They're
there's a
small.
bunch of
They're
things.
small.
Okay, so, I would ask also that you, and Todd touch base with, our counterparts in the health, committee.
Sure.
Because, they also make recommendations on the designated and specialized service agencies.
Mhm.
And it'd be really good if we can agree on what that should be and, not give different
Yeah.
recommendations.
Yeah, well, and that's also on the list.
Okay.
But one of the things we thought, which would be just a small ask, is looking at increasing the coverage for home share up into the Northeast Kingdom. And I have a lot of housing options. And if we could, figure out how to help older Vermonters who are basically overhoused up in the Northeast Kingdom, because there is limited ability for them to go anywhere else, and by a $235,000 investment to home share, they could expand up into the Northeast Kingdom
Mhm.
where they are not currently. And that might give some people some options.
What number is that on your list?
That would be, well, I broke down, so this would be 3.
Okay.
It's really a part of a housing.
Part of housing,
It's part of housing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, would you
Create
say
more
the number
housing.
again? Because I was having to,
235,000.
okay. It's specifically Northeast Kingdom expansion. And that's all GF though. Mm-hmm.
All right, the next one we talked about right now is Meals on Wheels. Just so everyone knows, I work for the Vermont Association of Senior Centers and Meal Providers. So this is the reimbursement rate that goes to AAAs and to the meal providers themselves. So just want to.
Thank you for being for
Transparent.
disclosure of that.
I just wanted to.
None of this money would go to pay your salary,
Correct.
however.
It does
Just
not.
want to make sure people
This goes
understand that.
directly to the meal
Directly
providers.
to the meal
Through the
providers.
AAAs. So just to kind of throw out the numbers, last year, 986,622 meals. Average cost, $13.42 per meal. Our current reimbursement rate, it works out to $5.80. And it's a combination of Older Americans Act, general funds, and Medicaid investment. So if we were to add $2 million to that, that would be eventually matched with Medicaid investment, which would be $4.40, would bring it up to $10.20 reimbursement rate per meal. As I said, the average cost per meal statewide right now is $13.43 for the nearly million meals.
And so how is that difference being achieved now? Because they're providing those meals. What are they doing?
So they're fundraising, they're, writing grants. It's different no matter where you are in the state. And the meal costs also vary. There's a rate study if anyone wants to take a look at it that actually draws it right down to the providers, individual 42 meal providers in our state.
And so it's important to know that there's a rate study to back
Correct.
that up, because people like to have data around that.
Mhm.
Rate study that was conducted by
Dale.
Dale,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep. It's a meal cost analysis.
Meal cost analysis,
Correct.
okay, not necessarily rate study, okay. And analysis, okay, 2 million GF,
Mhm.
and so say again what the gross would be.
But should it be added in with Medicaid investment?
Well, let's just make sure that we would want to maximize general
Yes,
fund, so if
course.
we are able to do that.
Make it 440.
Or,
Oh, sorry, 4.4.
thank you.
$4.40 a meal. It's about a million meals, so
Okay,
It's-
you're lost me,
right,
2 million
2 million would work out to about 4.4
million
million
gross.
gross.
4.8,
Oh, 4.8.
0.85,
What is the match rate this year?
41.2.
Is that the blended rate?
That's the rate that we use in the budget.
Okay, 41.2. Okay,
Write
thank
that
you.
down.
So I can do my own calculations on things to decide if we decide to make. Okay, 41.2%. Okay, 4.8 million. Thank you, Noel.
But
Oh, I don't know. I've got 4.4, 4.5, 4.8.
So what is
I'm
it?
right,
What is it?
4.8.
and then I added the 5.
4.85 I have.
Is it 4.85? Is that what you're?
4.85.
Oh, okay. I thought you were now saying 4.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
4.85.
4.85. Okay, thank you. Okay, and what number is that on your priority list? Number 4? Okay.
Then we have rate increase for DAs and SSAs.
That would be in the number you already gave me for that 4% increase.
But that's lower down. No. Because that's just on the home and community base.
DAs and SSAs are home and community based.
Correct. So they would be in there. It's at 13.9, but I have 12 for the 4%. It's 12. So I don't know where the 13 comes from. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
Okay,
I do want to make sure they're included, but I have 13.9 for.
we only want one number.
Correct, but I also have 12.1 for the home and community base.
Okay, so, so for purposes of what we will want to put forward, we'll want to know what each 1% equals. Nolan usually
Which I
has a
got
nice
from
little
Nolan.
spreadsheet.
I have it.
What she
Okay.
told me was
Okay.
1% is 6.57
That's
growth.
everything. So
Everything.
So
That
the
includes
DA
everything.
alone are 4.1 million GC.
Yeah, I don't really care about what's, alone, because I don't want to really separate out.
Yes.
I don't want to pit one group of providers against another. I want to include them all in one.
Yeah, because what I
Because
had
they have
was,
a long-term care crisis coalition.
yeah, what I had is 13.
I want to make sure that we're treating everybody.
But you said that they're included in the 1%, so that's where I'm coming up at 13. Okay, I'm gonna have to,
That's okay. I saw, so
that's what
the,
I got.
yeah, no, so so I'm just being clear about, we don't need to separate out, adult days, AAAs,
Correct.
home health, DAs, SSAs. Just want one number for home and community-based services. Or one number for each 1%, and then your recommendation about whether it's 2, 3, 4,
Mhm.
1, 8, whatever you're recommending.
Okay.
Okay, all right. You have anything you want to add, Todd?
I think we're good.
Okay. Do you have any little things? Do you have any little things? Well, I guess
Home share.
home share is a little one. Yeah, home share is a little one.
When and I need to talk more to Nolan about this, but when we met with Dale yesterday, there was some conversation around the conflict-free case management not starting at the beginning of the budget. And I was just talking to Nolan when we started committee, so I didn't really get to finish the conversation, but there was some discussion around potential savings there.
Because they have a full year in.
Correct.
It was 6 point something million.
It is 5.8.
Oh, okay, 5 point.
And so if it's a 4-month delay, it's approximately 1.9.
Well, I think they testified that it wasn't even going to start until October.
Correct.
Um,
The problem
Yeah.
is that becomes the base if you take it out. And then when you go into next year,
I was just saying, be careful.
be
If
careful.
you lower it to 3/4, you want to make sure that the full base is captured for the following year. So whatever you do, you want to make sure that you don't lose that money.
Correct.
So however you calculate is very, very clear. is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do.
And we were just starting that conversation when we
yeah,
started.
so that's fine.
So
But
I
think that's-
did want to
think that's
just point out that
fair.
there possibility of approximately 2 million
Mhm.
in savings that we may be able to take out. But then the question is, what impact will that have on next year?
Well, and I think absolutely in whatever recommendation we come out with, we'll need to be absolutely clear about whether we're funding a partial year or a full year. The same thing, we're gonna have a discussion about this with H218 and the opioid settlement fund. You know, there's recommendations in that came through, and for things to continue that haven't even started yet. And so we haven't spent the FY25 money yet. And so this is kind of a similar situation where we still support the policy, but we might not need to appropriate the full amount. So, okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Todd. Okay, we're moving on to the health department.
Yeah, boy, start talking.
That's a big one.
I think it's going to be very simple. They're mentioned H218. And so many of the numbers that we're looking at are being subtracted out of the budget to go into H218. So we'll have that conversation at another moment. So the biggest things that we're looking at right now, I suppose, is this pilot recovery campus. And just to talk about it for a minute, it's I understand it's $500,000 that's elsewhere, not here in this part of the budget, but it's elsewhere to secure the location.
Elsewhere, meaning in BGS, downstairs in corrections and institutions?
Might be DMH.
Yeah, you found it yesterday. Where did you?
Oh,
Here it is. It's in. I don't know how to read this.
312.
Yeah, B11, 1100. Was this it?
Oh, yeah, that was in the one-time section. Sorry, yes.
Yeah. So, one-time section?
Okay, and the one-time section for VDH or for,
Don't even know.
I mean, do we need to comment on it? I guess is my,
I'll tell you in a second.
okay.
Can you give me that picture?
So if there's 500,000 to acquire the property, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, a location, yeah.
To acquire. So I've heard different rumors
Mm,
about whether or not there is actually already a
Right.
defined location. So
They weren't able to talk about where it was or anything. They didn't, it's not, they haven't even begun the work, I guess, of figuring out where it's going to be. It sounded to me like it was going to be a rental situation.
well, then we wouldn't need $500,000 for purchase.
Health department.
It is in the health department. They wouldn't need $500,000 for purchase if they're renting.
Yeah,
Is that for fit up and
yes, yeah, once set up, yeah. That's what I understood.
modifications?
Right? What?
Yeah,
That's what they told us.
yeah,
That's for fit up and modifications? Is- Okay,
yeah. Space they don't know yet.
well, yeah, so that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I think that
but it's not in this budget anyway.
it is in our budget. It's just in one time.
Yeah.
That's part of the budget, Zon. One
Okay,
time is part of the budget. It's just not in the ups and downs.
I see.
It's in,
Okay.
it's in the other, and that's all right. This is all new. So yeah, that's why Nolan is, here as our backup today. So, and I appreciate you being here, Nolan. One time,
Mhm.
it just means it's not in a department's base. So when you're looking at ups and downs, when anybody is looking at ups and downs, those are ups and downs to the base budget.
Mhm.
So one time, not part of the base, so it's a whole different section of the budget. But they do have money in their base budget for this campus as well.
Right, yeah, for operating, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and that it's what did they say? Sorry. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Okay, good. Here we go. The ongoing, it just says it's not matchable, and they're getting the RFP ready to.
How much is it?
It's 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
And what is your team recommending? Are you seeing the validity of this? Have you heard from advocates about whether they think
Just
this is
from
a good
the-
idea.
Just from them, from the.
Health department.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like Foundation for Recovery or our recovery residences,
Mhm.
okay, so I think you need to do a little more digging.
Okay.
Okay? To see if there is general support for this concept and they must have something in writing about this concept. It would be really helpful. I don't feel comfortable recommending something in a budget if we don't really frankly have more details, then it's a good idea. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to chime in, just like the conversation with CDD and then this, it's like the reverse. Where like the CDD has stuff that they should be kind of thinking about spending money on. And in this case, it just seems like there's not enough information that we know that to kind of put aside money that we don't have enough information.
Yeah. Well, the senses I got, the sense that I have
Mhm.
is that it's going to be like the $1.1 million for it's something that's, it's something that's in the books that probably won't happen this year, my guess. Yeah.
And so I guess the other question I would have, since this is substance use related, why did it not rise to the top from the opioid settlement advisory committee?
Right.
I mean, that would be, that's where those recommendations come from. So they're asking for it in general fund.
Although they want it to ongo for.
It's global commitment fund.
It's GC, okay. So you think just say it wasn't matchable? Is it matchable? Is it an investment or is it?
No, it's global commitment.
So it's Medicaid. So it is matchable, apparently.
Asked the question and somebody said no, so I wrote down no
I
here.
know.
All right, I don't know how I'm
So is
supposed
it
to
like-
know that it is.
Right.
So it is confusing. I will back up.
Okay, so what?
When he asked, they said they are looking into matching options, but not yet. So that's where he's coming from, but I'm
Yeah.
looking on the ups and downs and it's under Medicaid global commitment. So there is a crisscross between what we're seeing and what we did here. So just to back up the representative.
Okay, so we're getting conflicting information a little bit.
So when they
Okay,
say matchable, they might be thinking something different than what we were, so we need to follow up.
okay. But it's under global commitment.
They said it was not matched, so they did say that. I was.
Yeah. So we've got, it wasn't that you wrote down the wrong thing, it's that they're giving conflicting information between what's in their ups and downs. So when you look at that spreadsheet you have open, it comes under the heading of global commitment, GC,
Mhm.
at the top, and so that's federal funds.
I see, yes,
So
okay.
that's matchable.
And if I had noticed that last night, I would have asked, but I didn't. I
Yeah.
know the ups and downs of the problem.
Okay. So I feel a little bit, Zon, like maybe we will have an opportunity on Wednesday. Is that when Dr. Levine is coming in? On Wednesday to get our hands a little bit more around this, okay? Because he's gonna be here on 2/18, but I mean, I think it's an appropriate question for us to ask. Was this presented to the opioid settlement advisory committee for consideration? And if not, why not? And, what's the timing of this going to be? And it would be helpful if between you and Eric, you can maybe divvy up and check in, with some of our usual and customary subjects on substance use and recovery and treatment, and just do a couple of phone calls and check in and see how people are feeling about it. I had the sense that it was a little bit of a surprise when it appeared in the governor's budget. But that might be wrong. It might just be the person I talked to.
Okay,
Um,
all right, so
Okay.
thank you, that's that. And then, so then we'll talk about the other big numbers in 218 and figure out whether or not we want to go there. And so then there's the only other request that I'm aware of is a very small one from Empty Arms,
And how much is that?
40,000
Okay.
1 year.
And is that rising to the top of your recommendation list?
I think so. I
Mhm.
mean, considering that we have 218 to work with, and there's going to be a lot of flexibility there.
And maybe just describe for other
MTRs?
members, because
It's a-
not
it's a-
everybody has talked to.
Yeah, it's a program that addresses a peer-to-peer program recommended. Actually, it's not offered any place in the state, so they're the only ones doing it for people who have lost a child in pregnancy. And or within, I forget, 1 year or 18 months. So
So it provides support.
support and
And gifts, like, I know somebody personally who benefited from it.
Yeah.
And she said she sent me a huge note when this was brought forward, and she said it just meant so much. She lost her little man after about 2 weeks, and she said that helps a lot, even though it doesn't, but you know, it was comforting to have somebody reach out.
And often, we hear a lot about peer supports in this
Yeah.
room.
yes,
And,
exactly.
this is, kind of like family to family, sometimes mom or dad to dad. And it makes a difference in this case. I think really a small amount of money can go a long ways to trying to help people heal from that, from those losses. So maybe we'll focus on the small amounts.
I like the little amount.
Okay. Anything else, Zon?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank
Anybody
you.
have any other questions for Zon?
Please don't.
Hey,
You did great.
I just gonna say,
Yeah.
just recognizing,
Yeah.
one, you and Eric are both new to the committee, okay? So, you didn't have the benefit of having, somebody who's been through the process before. So, that you did great. So, okay. I'm seeing, looking around that people are, coming to a place where they're being able to kind of like finalize their recommendations. So committee members, I'm going to ask that if you are able, as soon as you have something that's closing in on what your final recommendations are, and I recognize that they'll probably change, but if you could forward your, and you can write draft on them, but forward your charts to the rest of the committee, so that we can kind of look at what you've got down in writing and be able to kind of digest that before we have to vote on our priorities next week. That would be really helpful. Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Just FYI to the committee, and I did forward it, but we did just get in our hopefully requested
You did?
information. I haven't looked at it yet, but we
Okay.
did just get in a budget summary on the secure placements for DCF. So
Okay.
we know we'll be able that to drill down into.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
part of it. So.
All right, that sounds good. All right, any other questions about sort of where we're going on this? Okay, thank you all for the really good work that you're doing. It's a lot to comprehend, especially if it's your first time doing it. And it's, we have biggest chunk of the Agency of Human Services here. So it's the Appropriations Committee depends greatly on the recommendations that we send them. And so we want to make sure that we get it right as we can get it. Thank you for your continued work and us, drilling down, and please don't take any questions that I've asked, or the drilling down it's not criticism. It's just like, we need to just have a little bit more information before we are able to make recommendations. And, once this memo goes up on our website, then the fund moves to the Appropriations Committee.
So popular.
I know our room won't be as popular anymore, right? So, okay. Thank you all. You get a little bit longer for lunch today. Or, checking your emails and working on the stuff you got, and then we'll be back here at 1:00.
Thank you.